Hi, and welcome back to the Conscious Marketer podcast. This is Richard, and I'm joined by Kylie. Hi, Kylie.
Hello.
And I'm pleased to be sharing with you a special guest today, Jeffrey Van Dyk. Hi, Jeffrey. How's it going today?
Hey, great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, and Jeffrey is an international speaker, a strategist, and a guide who works with highly successful leaders and founders in the second half of life. Who know that they're meant to transition into their life's legacy and have a meaningful, lasting impact on the world. This is probably especially relevant to me. I'm coming up on my 50th birthday, so I've been thinking a lot about this legacy piece and how I want to spend the next 20 years and what I want to do. So a little bit about his background. He spent some time at Microsoft, and while he was there, he personally designed speaker training systems to help world-changing leaders like Peter Jennings, Bill Gates, and multiple heads of state, and help them to share their message more effectively. He has his website is called The Courageous Messenger, and today we're going to be talking about what it means to be a courageous messenger and how to kind of get your own work out into the world. Maybe, Jeffrey, you could start by just sharing a little bit of your journey and how you came to be teaching what you're teaching today. I'm sure we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I started off in the corporate world and had a fateful date with a guy named James who told me about using coach to start his restaurant. I was fascinated. The coach asked him things like, how are people going to feel in your restaurant? What sorts of conversations will they have? When they leave and talk about it the next day, what might they say? And from there, built, great, now what's the price point? And what does the decor need to look like? And what part of town should it be built in? And I couldn't stop talking about this after I went on this date. And at the time I was at Microsoft, but I knew like the gig was up. I knew it was time to leave. I just really was lost and didn't know where to go or what next direction to move in. All my friends, when I'd be like, yeah, I went on this date with this guy named James, and he's this thing called a coach. And person after person was like, you should do that, Jeffrey. And after maybe a half a dozen of those, I thought, maybe I should do that. So that's kind of what got me started moving out of the corporate world into the coaching world back in 2005. I was fortunate after about a year and a half in to have met a mentor, because the first year and a half, frankly, I knew I was good at what I did, but I had no idea how to market. I was a classic accidental entrepreneur. I had no idea I was actually starting a business. I was like, I'm following my calling, and that sober reality of, and you're starting a business. So I met a guy named Tim Kelly, who's a leader in the life purpose world, and his work just glommed onto my psyche like an octopus. I loved it. And it was really about how to connect with guidance outside of the conscious mind to download your higher purpose. And the part of it that he added that really was, to me, psychologically sound is getting permission from the conscious mind to talk to something outside of the conscious mind that can know your purpose and tell it to you. In other words, the doubts, fears, worries, concerns about, oh crap, well, if I really download my purpose and it blows up my life, what then? And that, I worked with him for years, and I met a woman named Suzanne Filter, who was a big online platform building expert at the time, and thought I was going to help people find their purpose and then build their online platform. It was a little too key. The thing really locked into place is seeing that we would create a brand for somebody, and sometimes they'd freak out and they'd go, I don't know if I'm ready for that. That could be a multi-million-dollar brand. So I started working with them on their resistance to that kind of success or money or reach or visibility, their wounds really around power. And over and over, I saw this connection between the life they've lived and the wounds they had and the people they're designed to serve. And that's really what I've built my work on ever since, is how can people alchemize their life story, see what happened to them as the gift that it is, and find the underlying patterning of their wounds to see what market really is hungry for their gifts. And we can talk more about that, but that's kind of how I got into what I do today.
That's super interesting. And I swear, Jeffrey, you're like the most quoted person who does story to my people. I quote you a lot. So, and one of those reasons is because you have clients who are shamans meet, what was it? Shaman meets architecture, like something crazy like that. And I want to hear that story after I say this, but I feel like a lot of times people come to me and they feel like they're supposed to do something because somebody told them they had to sell what was sellable, and then they hate it, and then they don't sell what they're here to do because they're told they can't, and I'm the one that's like, no, you totally can.
Yeah.
And so will you refresh my memory of the shaman architect guy?
Yeah. So his name is Matthew Tenzin. And I have permission to share his story. So he came to me in this place where, like, he had spent 2 years in silence in a Tibetan tradition, deep in the woods in California. And then he met his partner who had an interior design business. And it turned out he was a naturally gifted designer. So he came to me in this place where it's like, well, I'm a designer by day, and I still teach like meditation classes on Monday nights, but these worlds are supposed to come together in some way, and I know it in my bones, and I just don't know how. And I find that for a lot of us that are really meant to be change agents in the world, we're multidisciplinary. We pull from a lot of different places to create something the world hasn't seen before. So with Matthew, we looked at his wound story. He grew up as a gay kid in a super conservative evangelical home. I'm another one of those. And there was this big theme about the search for redemption in his life story. Like, oh, great. And so what I always do with the clients is we find what that theme is of their wound, and then we look at how that might be a theme in their market. Now, it's not a theme that the market's aware of. It's not something they're actively buying. You can't sell it. But if you know that's the theme, you can say, well, what's the symptoms of that they are aware of, have pain around, and are willing to spend money to address, right? And that's where you can market. With Matthew, he was like, my best clients are these kind of spiritual, wealthy women who, right, who go to yoga retreats and are blissed out, and then they come home and their energy in their home feels like crap. And so they'll sell that house and buy the next one. Lo and behold, the energy feels like crap again, over and over and over again, right? And I won't go into the details about how the redemption theme fit in there, but looking to find their own redemption and what they can buy, who they can be, etc. Matthew, he can dead people. He can read energy. There's this amazing story of him deep in the woods when he didn't make the tea for the spirit of the land, which is part of that tradition. And at 3, 4 in the morning in the middle of the woods, he heard boom, 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 these footsteps in his cabin when no one lives within, hours. And he heard, "Where's my tea?" Right? And this spirit, it was like, that night on, he was like, I ring the bell and I make the tea and I sing the song and, I honor the spirit of the land. So he really understands, he spent years in deep relationship with the spirit of the land. And he said, one of the things that is true about a lot of people's homes when they're really wealthy is they buy in beautiful land, which is often sacred land, where they don't necessarily have permission to be. And so a lot of his work is about helping them build a relationship with the land so that there's symbiosis of them living there and being part of that land. Part of what we did is I asked him, like, hey, what's wrong with the design industry? Because as change agents, we're here to do things differently and to shake things up, to be disruptors in a purposeful way. And he was like, Jeffrey, they do it all wrong. It starts with walls and windows, eventually get to design elements. Maybe they get to some energy with a little feng shui consultancy. He said, but your home is either pulling you to your future or anchoring you to your past. And he's like, we really should be starting with vision. What's the vision for your life? And how is this home meant to be a sanctuary that pulls you towards this vision? Then we can go into clearing the energy, building a relationship with the land. Then we can go into artifacts that activate that energy, crystals, pictures, etc. Then we can get into design and walls, windows. And basically, you created a design pyramid, like a pyramid, and flew on it, and that became true home design. And what I love about it is nobody does this. There's nowhere else in the world you can go for what he does, but he had never packaged it. So he could never monetize it for one, but he also couldn't share all that he is and all of his gifts. And, a month after working with him, he and his partner were in LA and we had dinner, and he's like, Jeffrey, we just had a new client sign yesterday. And he said they interviewed 4 other design firms, and they told us, hey, look, you're twice as much as everybody else, but you're the only people who understand energy, so we're going with you. And his business has just blown up in the 5 years since. So I love that because it's such a standard business design, and then he's taking this deeply spiritual, sacred process and weaving it together to create unique value and really change the way people experience their home and experience their lives.
Yeah, that's such an amazing story. And I think a lot of times, especially for people who are in career transitions, they have kind of a secret life of like their real passion, the thing they want to do. And then they have to make a pivot into that, or sometimes life forces them to make a pivot through a trauma or some incident or some great loss or something like that. How do you advise people to kind of step in? Your brand is the courageous messenger. How do people find the courage to move into what their true calling is?
One of my favorite Brené Brown quotes is, until you own your story owns you. And part of this journey is really alchemizing your story. In the classic move from this happened to me to this happened for me. And when we do that and really take ownership of the story, oh gosh, part of ownership is not like, I get that I am who I am today because of the life I've lived. But when we build it into the business, into the heart of the business, into the core of the business, and see the unique value it brings to the world, it almost exalts it. It lifts it up as the gift that it is. And when we do that, we stop having to hide so damn much. I find that in subtle ways, a lot of us are apologizing for who we are. If we've been told we're too weird or too different or too much or not enough or whatever the story is. And so we're busy trying to make up for that, which is this constant trying to catch up to something that we can never get to. This story of my life has been massively purposeful. I would not be who I am. But more than that, I know the people I know today. I would be able to serve the people I serve without it. That can really free people to come out. I find that all of my people have a kind of coming out to do, usually spiritually, right? About, I see stuff, I know stuff, I get stuff. All of the people I work with are highly intuitive. But oftentimes that's the secret life of how their work works. And when it stays secret, it never goes on turbocharge, right? It kind of can limp along a little bit. When I started doing this work, I grew up as a gay kid in Grand Rapids, Michigan, in an evangelical home where I was told every single day that I'd go to hell for who I am. I didn't tell a single soul for almost a decade after coming out to myself. It was my secret. I know what it's like to feel alone on the journey. I know it's like to have a part of you that if I expose this, I don't know who's going to leave me. I don't know what the relationship cost is going to be. I don't know what's going to happen in my community. And while the people I serve today often don't have a coming out to do sexually, still, when we come out about what we really see and know in the world, and that is the courageous messenger part, naming what we see, naming what we know, packaging it and delivering it, even when everybody else says, you can't do that, as Kylie said, you can't sell that. You got to do what people will buy. No, you don't, because guess what? You're going to commoditize yourself if you do that. You'll sell the thing everybody else is already selling. I have no interest in that. You're a unique being in this world with a perspective and experience no one else on the planet has. And so that piece of really acknowledging that your life prepared you for something and prepared you in a way that no one else in the world has that preparation. You know, no one has your backstory. No one has your experience. And because of that, nobody can empathize and understand the people you're here to serve like you can. When I got into personal development, I worked my ass off to fix myself. I thought like one day I'll be all packaged up, right? The bow is now tied on the gift and now I can present myself to the world. And instead, what I've found is that all of my people have wounds around belonging. None of my people grew up fitting in a classic sense. All of them have, struggles on some level with their messaging or marketing because, and they do not know this when they get to me, but if we are trying to belong, oftentimes what ends up happening is our messaging is anemic because there is that subtle apology. We don't want to rock the boat. And because of that, the marketing becomes dismissible. And then we go, why aren't people paying attention to me? I know I have something unique in the world. And the answer is, guess what? If you look for belonging in your market, but instead belong to yourself, you can take a stand for your market. And that's when you'll stand out and make waves in this world doing the good work you're meant to do.
I love that. And I know just from knowing you for a while, probably like 2012 is when I was working with Max and you were working with Max. I'm just super curious if you would talk a little bit about where you came up with the wound idea, because I know you've talked a little bit about life purpose or life or calling and giving examples of how that played out in your business and Matthew's business, but where did the actual idea of wounds and marketing come from?
I'll give you the non-logical answer first, and then I'll give you the slightly more logical one. The non-logical one is it got plopped into my lap from the universe as the thing that I was supposed to deliver. So how that occurred, when I worked with Tim, I learned a lot about interior parts, like my inner skeptic or inner critic or this or that or the other thing. And how to work with parts. I got trained in voice dialogue with Hal and Sidra Stone, really getting into the nitty gritty interior of people's psyche and what I would call the work of going into the Pluto zone, down into the underworld where the gifts are. As I said, when I worked with Suzanne, she would say, oh, I worked with so-and-so, here's the market's craving. And I'd be like, oh, wait a minute, I could have told you that. Because I was working with them on the reluctance to really step into their brand and going into their stories and into their wounds about showing up and being visible and being powerful and their fears about what might happen. But what I found is every single time, whatever that underlying pattern is, it shows up in the market. So if you have an abandonment pattern, you darn well better believe your best clients are going to have that pattern as well. If you have a betrayal pattern, I worked with a guy in Silicon Valley who is a consultant, and he had inbound leads. He got good referrals. He was good at what I did, but he didn't do outbound marketing because he had no real positioning in the market. His wife left him for his business partner. He was given up for adoption. There's just betrayal. And I was like, well, your CEOs are going to have a betrayal wound. He looked at me like I had three heads. And I was like, you're not going to market betrayal to CEOs, but we just follow the breadcrumbs. It's like stair stepping from the basement down into up into the penthouse where the presenting problem is. So with that one, betrayal, you don't trust people, right? If you trust people in your CEO, where's it going to cost you? With your executive team. If you don't trust your executive team, what's likely to happen? You'll be the bottleneck. If you're a CEO in Silicon Valley and you're a bottleneck, then what's the problem? Oh, you slow down or halt innovation. So we position him as an innovation consultant. And he knows when he goes and interviews potential clients, the first thing he asks them, like, hey, tell me about your executive team. Do you trust them? Do you rely on them? Because he knows, I look at this axis of transaction and transformation, that if we're just selling knowledge, that's just a transaction. It's the how-to. Here it is. I have it. You pay me. I'll give it to you. But for transformational work, there's this other axis of transformation, which is who does someone need to become to both get and retain the transformation you provide? So with him, for example, if he doesn't help them learn to trust his executive team, they're never going to stop being a bottleneck in their company. It's not just innovation consulting in terms of education and look at other pieces of it. It's their own psychology that prevents them from really having the whole team's genius on board. Similarly, if I go into a whole different market, I've got a client right now that works with people around helping them connect with their spirit guides. And a big piece for her, she had a ton of trauma in her early life. And the only people she could trust was not mom and dad, but her friends in the invisible plane who helped her get through it. I just did a story retreat with her, and she told the story about her dad was a lawyer. She went into work one day, and she worked at the office, and there was a note left that, hey, here's some things to take care of, and I'm going to go to the sunset. And it just struck her as weird. And checked to see if there were other notes, and there were. And something in her knew my dad's in trouble. And her guides told her, call the harbor master. And they sent the harbor master out, and they found him. And he had taken some pills, and it saved his life, right? And her whole thing is, I have had a really tough time trusting people. So I've needed to trust guides. And the work she does with other people is really helping them learn how to trust themselves and trust their guidance, right? And that's saying, hey, you don't need to just rely on experts or even on psychics or mediums or other readers. You can have your own guidance that you can know and you can trust and you can build a relationship with. And her particular audience, the trust thing, I said to her, look, you're post law of attraction, because a lot of her people do Abraham or The Secret or Mike Dooley or what have you. And she's like, I could not just swallow the pill that, well, my thoughts create my reality. Tell me about how that relates to the Holocaust. What about that, right? What about these other things? And she's snarky and funny and smart and questions things. And she argues with her guides left and right. And her people, her best people, she knows they're not just looking for, I want to connect my spirit guides. That's interesting. I have an interest in that. But she also knows they have a really tough time trusting themselves, trusting her even as another mentor or guide, trusting their own guides. And that work around trust is deeply embedded into her work, and that's why her work works. And that's what you for her if you have this betrayal thing and trust issues, but still want to connect with your spirit guides versus someone else. And that's where she carves out her unique market. The transaction is connect with your spirit guides. The transformation is build deep trust.
Yeah, that's really just fascinating. And so when you start working with people, is that part of the process that you're, initially doing? You're trying to figure out what their core wound is to see, both who they're attracting as a client and where that's leading them? Or?
Yeah. So we do a 2-hour intake for all of our clients, and we interview them about some of their core wound experiences. And the foundation for a wound is simply an experience that is painful and confusing, because it creates a vacuum of meaning that we have to fill. Why is this happening to me? And when we're kids and we can't blame mom and dad that's biting the hand that feeds us, go, oh, this is happening to me because I'm fill in the blank, unlovable, unwanted, I'm a loser, I'm a failure, I'm whatever, right? And then that sets up the quest to prove that we're not that, which is so much of the drive in the first half of life. But for every wounding experience, I ask these questions. How did you feel? What did you crave? What did you do? What skills did you develop? And what beliefs did you adopt? And each one of those has a marketing application. So how did you feel and what did you crave relates to the away from and towards motivators of your ideal audience. What did you do and what skills did you develop tells me about some of the unique value proposition you bring to the market because of the skills developed over, I call it your life PhD, over a whole lifetime of building those skills. And then what beliefs did you adopt tells me what the patterning is in the beliefs is the pattern. Based on those beliefs, and we talk about how have those shown up over your life, both from a high side and a low side. What have the challenges been when you're down in it? What are the stories you tell yourself about yourself? That's a real easy thing for anybody listening to ask themselves that question, because there's a good chance that your audience tells themselves the same stories. If you know what those stories are, then you can say, well, if I'm telling myself the story and trying to achieve this outcome, where am I going to run into problems that simple education won't solve? So when we do that, then we get the pattern. And from the pattern, then we go, great, if this is the belonging thing and you're in marketing, what's likely the symptom? If this is a betrayal thing and you're an executive consultant, where is that going to show up? And so there's a relationship between the pattern and the system that helps us shape where in the market you sit.
I love it. I feel like I need to work with you and spend a few days with you. Really fascinating work. I want to shift the conversation a little bit to more of a meta level, because I know a big thing that you're passionate about is kind of paradigm changing and changing the story of entire industries and even society and the worldview. And I'm kind of curious how your work is evolving into that aspect. And maybe you could give us an example of how that's kind of playing out. Because obviously our world is going through massive volatility, change, and it seems like it's an ideal time for us to maybe find better ways to do things and improve things.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about that as part of your work? Because I think it's very exciting.
Yeah. In 2013, I was guided to move to Los Angeles. I'd lived in San Francisco. Never thought I'd live in LA. But one particular drive back up to San Francisco was to my inner guides. And like, okay, really, why? And they said to me, Jeffrey, every city brokers a different form of power. DC, political power, New York, financial power, Silicon Valley, the power of tech, and LA is the power of story. And they said the story that humanity has been living has expired. It's not working anymore. And if we as a species want to survive, there's a new story for us to live. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was made flesh. We create our world with the stories we tell. So we have this world based on the stories we've been living. And there are people all around the world who are waking up, some coaches and therapists and healers, but also people in industry and all sorts of different industries, getting these downloads, getting these hits, these intuitive rumblings in their heart. There's something I'm meant to do. There's something I'm meant to contribute. And that is part of the new story. If there is a new story, which maybe we could call heaven on earth. Well, what's heaven on earth in the banking industry? What is it in hospitality? What is it, in auto manufacturing? So I'll give you one example. I have a client right now who is a real estate developer, and he came to me and he said, I keep getting this sense that there's a way to develop real estate that helps people self-actualize. And I was like, okay, have my attention, so we've really gotten into that world. And a lot of the work I do there is connecting people to their higher guidance and having them ask really specific questions about the bigger mission and vision so we can get a bigger perspective. And part of doing is building a whole company with IP, with all these different experts, from lighting technologists to neuroscientists to color theorists to interior designers, all who know a thing or two or three about how to use that particular perspective and technology to help people drop in, to help them decelerate in life. So when you walk into a building, what color should you see? If we use lighting that matches our circadian rhythms, what does that do to our neurobiology? And when people are able to drop in, the whole idea is to have them come home to themselves. And that, real estate is one of the primary places we spend time in our lives. So part of what we're doing there is building that IP and building that company. And then his development company will be a partner for it, developing buildings that use this technology to build really a whole new way of living. But the reason we're keeping it as a separate company is he plans to license it to other developers around the world, and having this be a new story for what residential real estate development can be. And that's just one example of, somebody saying, this is different. He's asking questions in real estate nobody's asked before. And part of how I work with him is not just using his conscious mind, but at every turn, hey, what does your guidance say? My guidance always tells me every inspired idea has a life force, has energy, and that it has intelligence to it as well. And so we can partner with it. This whole, that company being a separate company from his development arm, he had been wrestling with that for weeks. And he flew out to LA and we spent a day together. And at the end of the day, he said, I've been wrestling with this. And I said, okay, remember, this new company has life force. It has intelligence. Close your eyes, tune in, ask it. Is it meant to be part of this company or its own thing? And he goes, oh, no, it's its own thing. Ah, okay, why? Oh, because it's an IP company, which I can license, which allows me to bring it around the world with many developers. Okay, cool. Tune into the life force of the existing company. What does it want? What's its relationship? And he goes, oh, it's meant to be the perfect partner for this. That it's the company that helps prove this theory so that other developers want it, and it becomes a new adopted form in real estate. So I still look at people's wounds in terms of how it informed them, but on the hero's journey, right? We've got the call to adventure and we resist it and we go into struggle and we face the dragon. But then there's the return journey home where we become master of two worlds. And people that are really being called into paradigm change, I find, are often people on that second half of the journey. They went on their quest. They've faced the dragon. They have the gifts. And now it's time to bring them back to the world, bring them back to humanity, telling a new story. And that's really where that courageous messenger piece comes in. Because you're going to be bringing stuff nobody's seen before. And yep, there will probably be some naysayers and people that tell you you're nuts. But there will also be people, there's something that happens, which is when you bring that kind of technology, you solve a problem that people didn't even know they had until they see the solution. You might not have ever known, oh, my home is not conducive to the life I want to live, or to me being as actualized as I could be, until you see that there's an option to have your home help you with that. That may have never occurred to you before. And so a lot of times, what we're doing is we're developing something that is a solution to a problem people don't know they have. But the moment they see it, they go, holy crap, that's what I want.
I love that. And I know that based on when I quote you all the time and how our clients react, I know that there's going to be a lot of people listening to this that are super excited to test drive some of these concepts. And obviously we'll share how they can find you at the end of the episode, but I'm curious if you have a couple of concrete things that they can do to start sorting out, like, what's my wound, or what's my purpose, or what's my thing, what's my wound marketing thing.
Yeah, great. I'll share one piece on the wound marketing side and one piece on telling humanity's new story side. On the wound and marketing piece, the easiest way into it, the easiest hack for it, is to simply ask this question. When I'm having a really tough time, and maybe I'm being mean to myself, or I'm just in the dumps, what's the story I tell myself? So my story is, no one wants me. That's where my psyche goes. I don't have anything to offer. I don't know who wants me. And I can just, if I allow myself, I can just sit down there and mope that, I've got nothing to offer, which is related to nobody wants me. So then go, okay, well, the pattern is unwanted, right? That's the pattern. That's the wound pattern. And then I can go, well, if my people around the thing I do, if what was underneath their problem was that they're unwanted, how would that inform me more fully about why they are experiencing the problem, why they keep running into it, and particularly the problems that are recurring and seemingly unsolvable? Because that's where your greatest value is solving problems that other people have not been able to solve for them. And why haven't they been able to solve? Because it's not an education only thing that can do the trick, right? It's going to require that combination of education and transformation. So that's the place I would go there, and just start to ask yourself, well, if this was the pattern, and let's say you're a relationship coach and I'm not wanted. Well, how is that likely to show up in a marriage? Or how is that likely to show up in dating? And it can tell you a lot about their psychology. It can tell you a lot about how they feel about it. And then you use that in your messaging. Hey, I know that this might be coming up for you. And when it does, you probably feel this way. And when you feel that way, you probably take this action, which is why you keep having this result, right? And I get it, because I've been there too, and that's where your brand story can come in, right? But I got to tell you, there's another way, and that's where you paint a picture of a new world and a new path and make the invitation. So that's that side. On the other side, one of my favorite hacks when people have a visionary idea is to start dialoguing with the consciousness of the vision itself. A lot of my clients are already intuitive, and I say, hey, do you talk to guides? And they're like, yeah, I got peeps, right? I'm like, okay, cool, right? And we're used to checking in with my gang. Oh, okay, here's the answer I get. But this is a little bit more specific, which is, imagine the inspired idea, this thing you've called to do, has its own intelligence, and that you could talk to it, right? So if this is, this inspired real estate, let me talk to the life force or the intelligence of the inspired real estate itself. Hey, why did you show up in my life? Why am I the one to help birth you in this world? What do you want from me? What's my next step? Hey, I've been really struggling with this about this. How should I solve this? And keep going back to the intelligence of the work itself. It will always tell you the next step. It may not have the whole picture. Well, it probably does have the whole picture, but probably won't tell you because it would probably derail you. And it's really here to help you build trust in yourself and the universe. But the next step and the few steps after that, it's always there.
Those were two great practical pieces that I think everybody listening can take to heart, take to their soul, and really put into their life. Thank you so much for all of your wisdom, Jeffrey. Really incredible. Great to get to know you a bit more here. Let's just share how people can get in touch with you and learn more about your work. I know I wanted to mention, first of all, that you do have a podcast. Is that correct?
You can get that wherever you get your podcasts. I also have an album that I just released, an EP called You Belong. So Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you listen to music, you can check out that, Jeffrey Van Dyk, You Belong. Other than that, go to thecourageousmessenger.com. Everything I do is there. I do a weekly message kind of reading in my Facebook group for my community, have a weekly message I send out on Mondays. I'm now in the midst of a 7-part masterclass series on packing for paradigm changers. So everything's on thecourageousmessenger.com.
Great. Well, it's been wonderful speaking to you. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom on the Conscious Marketer podcast. And for everybody who wants to download this episode, you can, if you're listening online, you can also get the show notes. You can go to consciousmarketer.com/podcast and leave us a review. That's how we spread the word and get more change into the world. Thanks again, Jeffrey, for being here.
I'm so honored to be here. It's so great. You're brothers and sisters in this work. So thanks for inviting me.